AEW held its Full Gear pay-per-view from the Prudential Center in Newark, New Jersey last night with over 10,000 fans in the building. I thought Full Gear was a very good show overall. 4 new champions crowned, but this show had more blood than blood and guts. And that wasn't even 2 weeks ago. See, I'm a proponent of less is more. Tony Khan does not subscribe to that theory. He believes more is more. And that's fine. I mean, he could run the show however he wants, but it did affect my enjoyment of some of the matches on the card. I feel like there were matches that I would have liked more had they not gone overboard with some of the blood and the near falls, and if they would have left it to other matches like the main event. You know, you booked a steel cage match in your main event. Blood is appropriate inside of a steel cage. That's just old school wrestling. You can make it work without it, but blood enhances it, right? Blood in a cage match makes sense. It's a cage. People are going to bleed. We didn't need people bleeding buckets in multiple other matches on the show. But when you book a no disqualification match and a no holds barred match back to back, what else do you expect? I just wish they wouldn't have done that. But I mean, the main event introductions did not start until 12:04 a.m. Eastern. So all you West Coast folks, you're fine. But there was no fucking way I was sitting here for 5.5 hours watching this show and then going live for another 3 at 1 o'clock in the morning with a podcast to record the next day. So that's why you're getting it here. Tony Khan was actually asked about the length of these shows during the scrum after it was over. And he said that he was interested in changing around the start times. And he thinks that he won't run another show so late on the East Coast on a Sunday. Evidently, he has no issue doing this on a Saturday. But in regards to the length of the shows, he said this: our contracted time for the show has always been close to 4 hours. If you look back, every AEW pay-per-view has gone over 3.5 hours. There's never been one under that because we're required to run shows that go about 3 hours and 45 minutes. If we didn't, I would have people to answer to. Now, of course, he has a say in the length of these shows whenever those contracts are up for renewal. But I don't expect anything to change because he loves this shit. Who do you think asked for those 4 hours to begin with? Tony Khan. But it was a very eventful close to the show. We got a heel turn, a world title change, and the return of a former AEW World Champion. And it was not MJF. We all got all that in the span of a few minutes. Poor MJF, by the way. Can I just say this? Bret Hart did a Q&A recently in Montreal, where he was asked about guys that he would have loved to have been in the ring with. And he really put over Rey Mysterio the hardest out of anybody. I mean, he mentioned Kurt Angle and, John Cena and people like that. But he was fawning practically over Rey Mysterio and said Rey Mysterio may be the greatest of all time. But somebody in the audience called out MJF's name. And Bret's response to this was, who? He had no idea who he was. Even though the one time that we saw Bret on an AEW show was that first Double or Nothing in 2019 where he unveiled the championship belt, and MJF was part of that segment. He came out and cut a promo. Bret was looking at him from the ring smiling. I guess he didn't leave much of an impression on the Hitman, though, because he has no idea who he is. But Samoa Joe is now a 2-time AEW World Champion with the hook swerve and then the actual swerve, making his return after the match was over. And they ended the show with the sight of Hangman and Swerve standing side by side in the ring. And you got Hangman just looking crazed, and you've got Swerve looking jacked. And that's how they went off the air. I like the ending because I wasn't expecting it, but now it sets up a possible alliance, an uneasy alliance between Hangman and Swerve. Joe gets another run with the belt, which I don't think is a bad thing. Hook is back where he needs to be because this thing with him and Eddie Kingston was dying a fucking death. And it should get Eddie Kingston involved in all this also when he realized, assuming he's not part of all this, once he realizes what Hook did. And also, we still have no idea when MJF is coming back. And he's got that contract to cash in. And so all of a sudden, it creates a lot of questions around the main event picture and the championship and the ops. And, all of that stuff, which is good for TV. You want to create intrigue and questions for the television show. It was a lot more interesting than if Hangman would have just gone in there and beaten him again, which he already did at Wrestle Dream. We also had Mercedes Moné failing in her bid to win the big one. We had a reunion of the Elite. We had Jon Moxley tapping out. And they actually did not go 50-50, even Steven, on the booking with Kyle O'Reilly, which I was pleasantly surprised to see. And Pac had a match on this show with Darby Allin. Pac wins his match. So you got Pac winning. You've got Moxley losing. I mean, the story is right there. The story is right there as far as where you take this Death Riders thing. We have a new TNT champion. We have new AEW tag team champions. We had the first ever national champion crowned. And we also know that Okada and Takeshita and Kyle Fletcher, they have all entered the Continental Classic, which kicks off on TV this week. They didn't announce all the names in the tournament. Tony Khan has said he doesn't want to announce it yet, like on the Full Gear pay-per-view, because he wants to wait and see who comes out of the show. You know, do people come out of the show in one piece? Are they injured and not able to be in the tournament? So we'll get the names in a few days. But there's a lot going on here on this show. And there were things about it that I liked. There were things about it I did not like. On the whole, though, it was a strong show. Let's start from the beginning here, because I got a lot of thoughts on all this. The tailgate brawl. We had Max Caster and Anthony Bowens forced to team together again. I don't know why AEW management is so insistent on these two tagging with each other. They just wanted to go their separate ways. Why can't you just let them go their separate ways? Juice Robinson and Austin Gunn were in this. Big Bill and Brian Keith and the Outrunners, who never win anything. They didn't win the $200,000 that was on the line here either. That went to the Bang Bang Gang. Another meaningless money match with the Acclaimed, I guess, finally showing at least a willingness to work together and do some of their old tag team moves. And then it would get broken up each time. That was really the story here. But the $200,000, I mean, it's just so nonsensical at this point. We had, speaking of nonsense, we had Big Boom AJ and QT Marshall beating RPG Vice, Trent Beretta, and Rocky Romero. This was the obligatory Costco guys match. Not going to sell a single pay-per-view, but they're from New Jersey. They live in Florida now, but they're from New Jersey. So, of course, they were over with the crowd. I wouldn't be surprised if half the crowd was a member of their family. And the Rizzler was back as well, touching his face and doing all the stuff that the Rizzler does. They trotted out Paul White. They don't do that very often these days. But they trotted out Paul White to do commentary for this, and he played into the finish. So during the match, they had Big Justice, 13 years old, got into the ring, and he hit the worst diamond cutter that you will ever see on Rocky Romero. But the kid's 13, so I mean, what do you expect? It got a big pop. And he gets out of the ring. Trent Beretta reaches through the ropes and grabs the kid outside the ring. Paul White happens to be standing right there. And Paul White, he rears back and he clocks Beretta with the big right hand, the WMD, which caused Beretta to stumble backwards into a blockbuster powerbomb combo for the win. Harmless fun on the pre-show that appealed more to the live crowd, I think, than anything else. They gave Eddie Kingston and Hook a quick win over the Workhorsemen. This was just a nothing match. It definitely felt like, what are we doing here with these two? But by the end of the show, it became a little clearer, why that is. And with only 10 minutes left in the pre-show, they still had one match left for the CMLL Trios titles with Mystico, Mascara Dorada, and Neon defending against Kazuchika Okada, Konosuke Takeshita, and Hechicero. Okada was nowhere to be found, and Don Callis told us, well, it's travel issues. And despite being a 3-on-2 disadvantage for the heels, Hechicero and Takeshita, the bell hadn't even rung yet, and they're kicking ass. And Hechicero, he posted Mystico's shoulder first. He drove a chair into the shoulder, violently wrenched back on it, snapped it back. So doctors had to assist Mystico to the back. And then the bell rang, and now at least we were 2-on-2. And Neon and Dorada, they battled back with double dives. Now we cut to the outside, and Okada pulls up to the arena in a fucking McLaren. Talk about boss. He pulls up in a McLaren. Didn't the Young Bucks gift him a McLaren when he first came to the company, right? I could have sworn they did a segment on TV where they're like, hey, here's your new car. Only I think that car was a different color. This was black. But he pulls up in a McLaren. He gets out of the car. He's already in his gear. And he's in no great rush to make his way into the building and out to the ring. So that's where they bled over into the start of the pay-per-view, and they shot off pyro while the match was still in progress. And, I did not have an issue with them doing it last month at Wrestle Dream. A lot of people bitched about it, and I didn't really have an issue with it. And I said, they're trying something different. If they find, right, by their own metrics, if they find that it actually is helping in some way to drive interest in the pay-per-view and leading to some very late buys, then it's probably something that's worth doing more often in the future. This is not something they should be doing every month. Spread it out a little bit. You don't have to do it for every show. So Okada got his own entrance. Takeshita is just patiently waiting. Almost got rolled up by Dorada. Hechicero, he tried to play peacemaker because things were getting tense between Okada and Takeshita. And Okada offered a handshake, and Takeshita went to accept it, and Okada flipped him off. So now Mystico makes his way back to the ring, and his arm is all wrapped up because his arm got snapped earlier in the match, but he's out there wrestling like nothing even happened. Mystico hit La Mystica on Takeshita, but Okada broke up the pin. In breaking up the pin, Okada is just clubbing Takeshita across the back over and over and over with punches and forearms, and then he throws him out of the ring before Takeshita could even realize who it was that did it to him. So Takeshita returns. He spikes Naon with a bastard driver into a release German suplex. He signaled for the power drive knee. Okada, though, scurried in. He tried for a Rainmaker, almost intentionally missing and trying to take Takeshita's head off, but Takeshita ducked it. So they repeated the spot on Dorada, but this time Okada connected with a Rainmaker to Takeshita. And he looked so happy about this. So Mystico ended up winning it for Team CMLL with a La Mystica to Hechicero. Quick submission because ain't no way they were beating Okada or Takeshita in that spot. Callis had to get in the ring and calm the two of them down. Actually, in the aisle, he was trying to calm the two of them down. He left with Okada, and Takeshita was left visibly pissed off. So there was some great action here, but it was all a backdrop to the Okada-Takeshita stuff, which is honestly some of the best stuff they've been doing on television. They're ramping up the build to their eventual match. The Continental Classic, it kicks off on Wednesday, and I've been saying this for, I feel like, a few months now. That should be the final of this tournament. They both will be in there, and that should be the final of the tournament. I'm going to circle back to these guys because we got an update on this later in the show. The pay-per-view opened proper with Darby Allin against Pac. Darby had an entrance video before his match. He was all bandaged up in the burn unit in the hospital like a mummy, watching highlights of Pac just kicking his ass over the past couple of months, including what happened to him at Blood and Guts when he got dumped through the flaming tables. So then Darby gets up, he smashes the TV with a baseball bat. I was really hoping he would come out to the ring all wrapped up in the bandages, like Michael Myers in Halloween 4. But he pulled his hoodie down and he just looked totally normal. He looked totally fine. Pac said something coming into this, that he wanted a wrestling match with Darby. No weapons, no bells and whistles. You can't out-wrestle me, right? That's how it started. It started with wrestling. Darby, of course, tried to kill himself multiple times in this match. One of these days he'll succeed, I'm sure. Pac got the brutalizer applied. Darby made the ropes. He went out for the Black Arrow, but he crashed and burned, and Darby locked on the Scorpion Deathlock, the same hold that he used to beat Jon Moxley at Wrestle Dream. And that's when Pac is summoning some help. We can't see who it is. Then we see it's Wheeler Yuta who comes out. He runs distraction. And Darby stupidly lets go of the hold, which allowed Pac to grab the baseball bat and crack him in the face with it when he turned around. And he got rid of the evidence, and he covered Darby, and he got the win. I like the idea that it was Pac who requested a clean wrestling match without weapons, right? You can't out-wrestle me. But he resorted to using a weapon to pick up the win when it looked like Darby was about to do just that. So a very basic story they told. The match was fine. Pac going over does make sense in the bigger picture if the story is going where I hope it's going. He had to win this match. We had the Timeless Love Bombs. Toni Storm and Mina Shirakawa. We had Marina Shafir and Megan Bayne. We had the Babes of Wrath, Harley Cameron and Willow Nightingale. And we had the Sisters of Sin, Julia Hart and Sky Blue. The winners of this four-way match would get to pick their stipulation for their semi-final round match in the tag team title tournament. The match itself, Solid stuff for the most part. Late in the match, Bane hit Fate's Descent, which is her version of an F5, on Mina. Into the Mother's Milk submission for Marina Shafir as Bane was holding off Toni Storm. Very similar to the finish of the Blood and Guts match, only this time Storm got free. She saved her partner. Toni and Marina, they went at it, missing a Harley Cameron blind tag. Harley ran into a choke bomb. Hart and Blue, though, broke up the count. Megan Bayne sent Julia Hart and Sky Blue flying with a double German suplex, but Willow launched Bayne with a pounce and then a cannonball off the apron onto Marina Shafir. So with a pile outside, Mina flew off the top onto everybody. That left Harley Cameron and Toni Storm inside alone. Toni finally hit her big package. It's not a small package. It's a big package. And she got the flash pin. I thought Megan Bayne and Marina Shafir would win this and pick the stipulation, and then Toni and Mina would overcome them and move on to the finals. But with the baby faces picking the stipulation, I'm less sure of that now. Mina actually suggested last week that they might have a Taipei death match. Don't threaten Tony Khan with a good time. I'm sure he'd love that. I still think it's dumb to even have stipulations in this tournament. I just think it's just not needed. We had Brodito, Brody King and Bandito, the AEW Tag Team Champions, defending their titles against FTR. I hate that they soured me a little on this with all the kickouts at the end. It got so ridiculous. Because until that, this was an excellent match. And then that took me out of it. There was a shatter machine that was countered into a DDT. Cash Wheeler, though, saved his partner from a 21-plex from Bandito, only to take the move himself. Bandito got to his feet, but he spun around into the shatter machine. Brody King broke up the count at the very last second. Wheeler got placed against the barricade outside. Brody King came charging in. He missed, though, with his charging crossbody. He collided with the steel. Wheeler took one of the tag title belts. He had a tug of war with Brody King as Bandito rolled up Dax Harwood. With Wheeler smacking Bandito with the belt, referee Paul Turner didn't see it. Harwood got a roll-up, Bandito kicked out. That was a convincing near fall. That one worked. Harwood took a shatter machine by Brodito, but kicked out. Wheeler put a stop to Brodito's monkey flip 450 by crotching Bandito and then wiping out King with a wild dive. There was a Doomsday Device attempt that got countered, with Bandito actually using the momentum to his advantage. He caught, I think it was Dax, into a backflip crossbody for a 2 count. FTR fought with King on the apron. They hit a spike pile driver on the edge of the ring. Back inside, Bandito tried a handspring. He got flattened, only for 2. FTR quickly followed with a spike pile driver, but again, Bandito kicked out. And Bandito had a little fight left in him, not enough to avoid the shatter machine, and for the third time, FTR are the AEW Tag Team Champions. This was a great tag team wrestling match that just went overboard on all of the kicking out of big moves in those final few minutes. I just wasn't a fan of it. Now I readily admit I may be in the minority on this. The live crowd ate it up, but that takes it down a notch for me. Still an excellent match, one of the best on the show. It had the expected outcome that now sets up the returns of Adam Copeland and Christian Cage, right? Eventually you got to do the rematch. And I'm sure that's where they'll win the tag team titles. That's why you had to get the belts back on FTR. Maybe that doesn't happen for a while. I could see that being the Revolution match in March. So FTR may have a few months with the belts. I mean, Revolution tends to be one of their bigger shows of the year. And hopefully not the last time that we see Bandito and Brody King as a team. I mean, as far as unexpected pairings go, this is one of the more successful ones that I could think of. It's a team where both men absolutely benefited from the pairing. And they got a longer run with those belts than I thought they would. I thought they would drop them at All Out. I thought it was going to be a quick run, but they got a little more length with them. Now, at this point in the show, Nigel McGuinness stepped away from the announce desk to make way for Bryan Danielson to join Excalibur and Tony Schiavone on commentary. We had the Casino Gauntlet to crown the first ever AEW National Champion. They copied the same design as the original NWA National title for this title. It looks like something straight out of 1985. And it's also the same design as the old NWA television title. And if you'll notice, the same design as the Hulk Hogan 85 belt. It's So I'm pretty sure they all just used the same mold back then to make these belts because they all look identical. We got Bobby Lashley and Shelton Benjamin opening this at 1 and 2. The match keeps going until someone wins, so you never know how many people are going to be in this thing. They didn't do much fighting. They did a little bit of wrestling before Ricochet entered at number 3 with a mic in his hand, saying that the fans wanted to see them fight, not wrestle each other. And that's when the Gates of Agony attacked them from behind in the ring, and Ricochet, he ran down to ringside and cracked MVP in the head with the microphone repeatedly, looking into the camera at one point and telling Big Boom AJ, hey, check this out, boom, as he bashed MVP in the head with it. That was kind of amusing. So GOA, they demolished Lashley and Benjamin at ringside. They left them laying, and down is where they stayed for the majority of this match. Claudio Castagnoli entered at number 4, and he looked like a beast in this match. Daniel Garcia was number 5. Orange Cassidy was number 6. Wheeler Yuta was number 7. So we had to listen to the opening of that Death Riders theme song far too many times here in this match. There was a funny spot where all the Death Riders were hitting Cassidy with locomotion strikes in the corner when all of a sudden Ricochet kind of jumped in the line and he delivered one also. And then he tried to buddy up with the Death Riders and Claudio just killed him with an uppercut. That was great. Kevin Knight was number 8. Roderick Strong was number 9. Mark Davis was number 10. And I will admit, I had the same reaction that I would when Skinner or Virgil would enter the Royal Rumble at number 22. I'm like, oh, all right. But then Davis started spiking everyone with these brutal-looking pile drivers. He actually got himself over. It was only fleeting, but he did get himself over a little bit there. Speedball was out at number 11, so we had both members of Jet Speed going at it. And Matt Menard was number 12. And he ended up being the last one out. I guess we'll never know who was left at the gorilla position. Who would have been out at number 13? I don't know. But he went right up to confront Daniel Garcia with all the history between the two of them. And they fought for a little bit. Garcia bailed into the crowd. Menard was in hot pursuit. And finally, Lashley and Benjamin, they finished their power nap on the floor and they started kicking everybody's ass. Cassidy hit Davis with an orange punch, and Ricochet was about to take one. Yuta, though, flew in with a Busaiku knee, nearly stole the pin, but Kevin Knight hit a UFO splash. And then Ricochet came out of nowhere with a spirit gun on Kevin Knight, and he got the win. To capture the championship, GOA came back out to present Ricochet with the title and raise him up on their shoulders. This was not as fun as some of the other casino gauntlets they've done, and there were no surprises in this one like we usually get. I was pulling for a Jay White return. No dice on that. Instead, they used it as more of a showcase for their mid-card, which is not a bad idea. I mean, let's be honest here. I mean, they're all in there fighting for a mid-card title. But now we know why, Ricochet was squashed so quickly by Lashley on Dynamite. It's like when WWE would have someone win the Money in the Bank briefcase, and then they just got beat, right? They just beat them for months and months and months on end to shock you when they eventually cashed in and won the title. Even guys like Mark Davis, though, had a chance to shine here in this match. So they created a new title to give Ricochet something to do, effectively. That's basically what they did. So now he can go out and defend the title in other promotions and on the indies, and that's great for those promotions because now they can, promote an AEW title match on their shows. Ricochet is defending the title on the Ring of Honor Final Battle pay-per-view on December 5th, which would be the first time that an AEW title is defended on an ROH pay-per-view. I cannot say the same about the reverse of that because we see Ring of Honor championship matches all the time over the last couple of years in this company. But that would be a first. I don't know who his opponent is going to be. That hasn't been announced yet, but they have said that that title is going to be defended on that show. We had Jon Moxley against Kyle O'Reilly. No holds barred. We got a bloodbath with these two at Blood and Guts, and they went right back to it on this show. Kyle bled a gusher. Then Moxley did. Moxley was biting at the bloody wound and stabbing him with a fork. He stabbed him in the nipple at one point, too. Just another day in AEW. And then Kyle got possession of the fork, and he used it. And he also introduced a chain into the match. Moxley got a bulldog choke using the chain. O'Reilly scrambled into a full mount, only Moxley pressed on the throat to get free and applied an STF. Kyle has the fork now. He stabs Moxley's hand with it to get free, but Moxley hit a curb stomp onto the chain. Moxley gets a chair. He traps O'Reilly's arm and he Pillmanizes it. So a Death Rider follows. That spikes O'Reilly, and Moxley sinks in a Kimura lock, only to see that get countered into an ankle lock. O'Reilly slams Moxley's leg onto the chain. He wraps it up. He got the ankle lock once more. Moxley tried to fight out of it until he could not fight anymore. And he tapped out. He tapped again to Kyle O'Reilly. So after the match, a visibly frustrated Moxley, he gave a nod of respect to O'Reilly, who collapsed, and he was checked on by the doctors. Moxley was going to go leave with Marina Shafir. He looks back at the ring. He's muttering to himself. Maybe he hears the voices in his head. And he goes back to the ring, and he attacks him. And the Death Riders come to ringside. Moxley leaves with them. Roderick Strong and Orange Cassidy come out to help O'Reilly to the back. But you could see the other Death Riders, especially Pac and Claudia, they were not necessarily thrilled about what happened here. You know, the fork and the blood, I could have done without all that stuff, given that we just saw it from these two. I mean, like literally 10 days ago, we saw it from these two. They still kept the focus on the submission attempts, which is really what the story has been built around between these two guys outside of all the violence. It boils down to Jon Moxley being deathly afraid of getting trapped in a submission hold by Kyle O'Reilly because he did not want to tap out like he did to Darby Allin. And that's exactly what happened at the end of all this. You know, I don't give a shit about all the other garbage that we saw here. I'm sorry, I don't. It's a crutch. It's a crutch that they don't need. The more important part of all this is that they didn't just have Moxley get his win back from Blood and Guts. He actually tapped out again. And Pac also won his match over Darby Allin. Pac wins. Moxley loses. Something has to give here. And you saw the looks on their faces at the end. It's coming. Either a hostile takeover of the Death Riders or an implosion of the entire group. If they keep this thing going, Pac looks to be the new leader, not Claudio. Claudio had, I mean, again, in recent appearances, he's looked like a beast out there. But I see Pac being in the Moxley role, right? And credit to Moxley for doing all he can over the last month to help get Kyle over to that next level. I don't see Kyle O'Reilly sticking in that spot. I don't think he's the guy that I would have gone with if I was trying to use this to truly make a new top guy. But Moxley has done what he could to help get him there. And you would think that O'Reilly would ride that momentum right into the Continental Classic, and you would have him in there. Tony Khan, after the show, said that it's unlikely that Kyle makes it to the tournament because he's dealing with some injuries coming out of that match. And I couldn't really tell if that was part of the story or if he really is. I'm sure he is banged up. But whatever the reason, he claims it's an injury or a series of maybe minor injuries coming out of the match. He will not be in the Continental Classic. So I don't even know what they do next with Kyle O'Reilly. You really want to use this. I understand the reason that this was done more than anything is to further the breakup of the Death Riders. If we're being honest here, that's really what this is all about. This is not about, oh, what can we do to make Kyle O'Reilly into a world title contender, right? That's not why this was done. But because he was the guy in that spot, you would hope that, okay, let's take what we have here. He's gotten some pretty big wins. And let's maximize this and try to make something out of this. If Kyle's hurt, legitimately, I don't know what that means, but he will not be in the tournament. So right from one bloodbath, no holds barred, they went right into another bloodbath. This one, no disqualification, which is the same shit. I mean, there's literally no difference between the two. It was the other Kyle Fletcher, defending the TNT title against Mark Briscoe. And if Briscoe loses, he would be forced to join the Don Callis family. I have no idea why Tony Khan laid the show out like this to put these two matches back to back. I really don't understand that. Briscoe started bringing weapons out not long after it started. He placed Fletcher against the ladder, up against the barricade outside. He tried a somersault dive. He crashed and burned through the ladder. Fletcher violently launched the ladder at Briscoe's head, busting him open. Fletcher threw another ladder into the ring and continued to slam Briscoe onto it. Now, Fletcher placed the broken ladder between the ropes, and he used it as a platform. Only Briscoe hit an uppercut, and then he tossed the ladder to Fletcher, and then he drop-kicked it back into Kyle's face. And Kyle came up bleeding also. So we got double juice here in this match as well. Briscoe placed him on a table at ringside, but Fletcher rolled to safety. He was arranging furniture with a bunch of chairs, but he took too long, and Briscoe threw one at his face. Briscoe went to climb the ropes. He got distracted, though, by Don Callis, who was out there on commentary, and Fletcher launched Briscoe through the table. So another table was placed in the corner of the ring. As Fletcher went for a lawn dart, Briscoe escaped. Briscoe wanted J-Driller. Fletcher countered out. He put him through the table. Fletcher then went to the thumbtacks, which have no meaning for me anymore. When I see someone pull them out in this company, they have no meaning for me anymore because we see them used weekly at this point. Like it is practically a weekly staple of these shows. Only it's not a staple. It's a tack. Maybe that'll come next. I don't know that would hurt though. I guess a staple wouldn't hurt. Whatever reaction though that I used to have to thumbtacks, it's been replaced now by apathy. So Fletcher spreads them all over the ring and he places them in Briscoe's mouth and he hits a super kick. Briscoe escaped the last ride attempt. He spiked Fletcher into the tacks with a fisherman's buster, only for 2. So Briscoe gets 2 tables from under the ring, one of which is covered in barbed wire, and then he also grabs a taller ladder, which he sets a table up in front of. This took forever for him to set up. Fletcher is on the apron. He tries a brainbuster off the apron through the tables, but Briscoe counters into a blockbuster off the apron onto the chairs instead. Are we having fun yet? Are we having fun? Back inside, Briscoe puts Fletcher on the table. He climbs the ladder. He gets cut off. Briscoe fights Fletcher off. He lands a froggy bow crashing through the table. Briscoe pulls in the barbed wire table, but did not see Callis slip the screwdriver to Kyle Fletcher. Fletcher hits a low blow. He starts stabbing Briscoe with the screwdriver, and then he licks the blood off the screwdriver. I don't know who this shit is supposed to appeal to, but it's not me. Fletcher missed another shot. Briscoe hits a low blow of his own. He hit a brain buster onto the thumbtacks. And Kyle Fletcher, comically, Kyle Fletcher kicked out. Because of course he did. Briscoe went up top. Fletcher shoved referee Stephon Smith into the ropes, which crotched Briscoe. Kyle places the screwdriver now face up in the turnbuckle pad. He is going to try an avalanche brainbuster. He is looking to impale this man. Briscoe slid out, though, but then he got stabbed in the head with the screwdriver. Fletcher hits his brainbuster, but Briscoe kicked out. Fletcher wanted the avalanche brainbuster, though. But again, Briscoe escaped and he hit an avalanche razor's edge through the barbed wire table. And finally, the J-Driller connects onto the tacks, and Mark Briscoe gets his first taste of singles gold in AEW. He is the brand new TNT champion. And good for Mark Briscoe to go from being banned from TNT to representing the company as the TNT champion. That is quite the journey. And it made for the feel-good moment at the end. I did not love this the way that other people did. But the story of Briscoe fighting through adversity and the prospect of having to join the Don Callis family, it was a good one, though. And in the end, the hero beat the villain. He got the big moment. So I will say, for what this was meant to be, they did what they set out to do. I am not going to fawn over this the way that other people are fawning over this match. But it accomplished what it set out to do, and I'll leave it at that. We had the first ever $1 million match with Kenny Omega and Jurassic Express taking on Josh Alexander and the Young Bucks. Despite being 0 for 3 tonight, when he was asked about his chances in this match by Excalibur, Don Callis said he's not concerned as everything is coming up aces for the Callis family. Omega was holding his left leg after a slingshot crossbody to the floor. Alexander immediately targeted it. The Bucks tried to dive. Luchasaurus was not in the right position. Nick landed badly. Matt Jackson teased the moonsault on Jack Perry. Switched in midair, though, to take out Omega on the floor instead. Perry remained isolated until a desperation DDT planted Alexander for the double down. In comes Luchasaurus with the hot tag. And the Bucks were able to escape a double choke slam with a super kick. Luchasaurus bounced back. All 3 men were down after a series of clotheslines, or I should say both men and the dinosaur were down. Omega tags in. Alexander runs in, or runs for a tag. The Bucks, though, would not give it to him. The You Can't Escape halfway connected, missing the moonsault. Perry flew in with head scissors. Nick launched in with a destroyer on Luchasaurus. He got blasted, though, with a V-trigger for the reset. We got a forearm battle between Omega and Alexander, who was bleeding from the forehead, even more blood. He got an ankle lock on Omega, and while still in the submission, the Bucks hit a BTE trigger on Omega, who ended up making it to the ropes, ultimately. The Bucks wanted a Meltzer driver. Luchasaurus, though, made the save. The Bucks and Alexander connect on the assisted tombstone for a near fall. Countdown to Extinction connects. Alexander, though, just broke the count. There was a double doomsday that was countered with the Bucks landing on their feet and ramping up a super kick party, accidentally kicking Alexander off the apron right into a one-winged angel by Omega on the floor. Back inside, Perry tried a backslide on Matt, who slid through, and the Bucks hit a very quick BTE trigger on Jack Perry to win the $1 million. This was good, although my expectations for Omega and the Bucks on these pay-per-views is pretty high, so it wasn't anything blow away like we've gotten from them in the past. After the match, Callis got into the ring with Mark Davis and Hechicero and Rocky Romero and El Clone coming down. Forgot about him. Coming down to the ring, telling him they're rich and it's time to celebrate. And Callis went to go walk the Bucks up the ramp, and they start leaving, and they have two, giant bags of money. But back in the ring, the family attacks Kenny Omega. Matt and Nick, they see this happening, and they ask Don Callis, what's this all about? And Callis just wants them to go spend the money. These two guys were broke. Now they want $1 million, and he's already got them running out and spending it. He would make a terrible financial advisor. So the crowd is chanting, "You sold out" at the Bucks. The Bucks, though, having a crisis of conscience, they ultimately throw down the money, and they hit the ring, and they dish out super kicks to everybody. Dummies! I would have taken the bags of money to the ring with me and then super kicked everyone. You don't leave the money. Jurassic Express, they check on Omega before offering a handshake to the Bucks, who accept. And Omega slowly gets up. He starts putting the pieces together, and the crowd is chanting, "Hug it out, hug it out." And the Bucks offer a handshake. Omega slaps their hands away and says, "Nope, we got to hug." And they all hug. And the Callis family is furious on the ramp, but they have all the money, which really is all that matters here at the end of the day. If you tell me, hey, you want to rekindle this friendship, or do you want the $1 million? I'm taking the $1 million. I'll buy me some new friends. So this was good, and we got the big elite reunion here at the end. As much as I was enjoying the broke Buck stuff, unless they were just going to go right back to it, I mean, I don't know what else you would even be doing with the Young Bucks. They've been heel for so long. This only makes sense, to try to rekindle whatever magic they had with the elite before and just take things in a different direction. We had Chris Statlander against Mercedes Moné for the AEW Women's World Championship. This was a victim of the show going as long as it did and putting it right before the main event. The positioning hurt the match because for a good portion of it, the crowd was very quiet. And I really think that if you would have put this on in the middle of the show, the live reaction would have been very different. They went on, I think it was third from the top last year at Full Gear, but that was for the TBS title, right? It wasn't for the Women's World title. This was all about Mercedes trying to win the big one and notch her 14th championship. And they told a good story working a body part. Statlander played like she hurt her arm early in the match, and so Mercedes went to work on it. It was quite the come down from blood and tacks and barbed wire tables and screwdrivers. They actually went out and had a wrestling match. And the crowd did not sound terribly excited to see it at 11:30 at night. There was a spot where Mercedes did 14 amigos instead of the usual 3. One for each title that she hoped to have at the end of this match. And the crowd applauded her for it when it was over. That's not an easy thing to do 14 times like that. After that, she went up top, missed a frog splash after Statlander caught her with an up kick right to the face on the way down. Statlander made her comeback with a spinning fisherman's buster for a near fall. Mercedes responded by snapping the arm through the ropes. She tried a Meteora off the apron. Statlander, though, countered into a blue thunder bomb on the floor. Both women just made it back inside in time. Mercedes hits a sunset flip into the corner. Mercedes signaled for the end, only to run into a lariat. And Monet desperately goes for an armbar. Statlander counters into a ripcord belly-to-belly for 2, and then applied a statement maker of her own. Monet, though, bent the wrist back and got the submission locked on. Only Statlander was able to power up and out of the corner. And Monet switched to a rear naked choke. Statlander switched to a fireman's carry for an avalanche gutbuster for 2. I remember seeing Dean Malenko do that to Rey Mysterio on Nitro back in the day. Statlander wanted Saturday Night Fever. Monet counters, and each woman is trading seatbelt pin attempts, which we've seen Mercedes win before with. So and I think Statlander as well. So they trade seatbelt attempts for near falls. Statlander manages a package pile driver. Monet barely gets her fingers on the bottom rope. And Mercedes fought out of the corner. She looked for a Meteora. She got caught, only to switch and hit a Poison Rana and a Meteora for 2. Both women traded finisher attempts until Statlander avoided the head scissors and countered into Saturday Night Fever, spiking Mercedes on her head and pinning her to retain the championship. I really like this match. More than the live crowd did. I still think it was a beat or 2 below their Full Gear match and their World's End match from last year. So if I had to rank them, this probably would be ranked, dead last out of all 3, but this was still excellent. And I'm torn. I'm torn between this and the tag team title match as my favorite match on the show. The lack of excitement from the crowd really hurt it. I mean, it never had that epic feel to it like the tag match did. So I would probably give the nod to Brodito and FTR, but this was right up there as one of my favorite matches on the show. If not number 1, then it's number 2. And the story is exactly what it needed to be. Mercedes, I've been saying it for weeks, Mercedes had to lose this match. She simply cannot win the big one. This was only her second loss since joining AEW, and both of those losses have come in matches where she challenged for the world title. So now the next logical step is the crash out, the downfall. It's coming. She's got 13 belts. Not all of those belts are actually defendable. She's got the fucking Owen Hart title in there, but she's going to start going out on these independent shows, and you watch. She's going to be dropping these championships one by one over the next several months. It's not going to be an instant thing. But she's going to go out now, and she's going to wrestle in all these different places all over the world, and she's going to start losing these championships because this is going to be her spiral. And eventually she will win that world championship, but that doesn't come until much later. It never made any sense, the idea that she still has 13 belts that she's running around with every week. You want to put the world championship on her. Why? If you're Tony Khan, why would you do that? Because she's going to start losing some of these other belts. I don't want my world champion going out there and, defending the Bestia championship in fucking Rome, Italy, and losing there and losing here. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. The championship comes when she has no other gold. She has to hit rock bottom before she can make her way back up to the top. Lexi Nair was backstage with Don Callis, Kazuchika Okada, Konosuke Takeshita, and Hechicero, who was in charge of the money tonight. He had the bags of money. And Callis said that Okada and Takeshita, once they get on the same page, they're going to be the best team in AEW history. And Okada and Takeshita, they blamed each other for losing the match tonight, and Callis said Okada will defend his Continental title in the Continental Classic. And he'll prove why he is the best tournament wrestler of all time. Takeshita said, well, that's fine. I will also be in the Continental Classic. And the fans in the arena popped. Kyle Fletcher storms in. He's still caked in blood. Said that what happened to, Proto-Kata and Proto-Shida. Like, what happened? Neither one of you were there for me when I needed you. So I am also entering the Continental Classic. And he storms out, and Okada tells Takeshita, now look what you've done to Kyle. So that's 3 members of the Don Callis family that we already know are in this tournament. I really don't think they need more than that. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous, honestly. If you got 12 spots, how many spots are you going to give to one group? I think that's enough. Unless, of course, there always has to be a Beast Mortos in this tournament. That could be the role that goes to Hechicero, where he goes in there and loses every fucking match. They always have at least one person like that in there. Maybe it ends up being Hechicero. Hey, maybe it's El Clone. If El Clone ends up in the Continental Classic, you'll know why. And in the main event, which did not hit the ring until after midnight locally, Hangman Adam Page defended the AEW World Championship against Samoa Joe in a steel cage match. If I was wrestling on an AEW pay-per-view, I would, and I'm not a political person behind the scenes, right? I let things play out. I mind my own business. I would politic my way out of the main event spot. I'd be the only person in human history on a wrestling pay-per-view to politic my way out of the main event and not into the main event. I would pull a reverse Triple H just so I would not have to go to the ring so late. It does these guys no favors. They just have to work that much harder to get the crowd up for it. It's not their fault. He has a new theme song, does the champion. Hangman came out to American Venom, which apparently is from the Red Dead Redemption 2 game or soundtrack. So I don't know if it was a one-night only thing. I got the sense that might be his new music going forward. If so, it will take some getting used to. Page had his ribs and neck taped. Joe is the first person here to get slammed into the cage. And he is the first to bleed. We are not even 2 minutes into this match. And a few minutes later, I'm looking at him, and he has a gash on his head. My God. I mean, it was like a fucking faucet with all the blood that was just gushing out of this man's head and just streaming down his face to the point where he was clearly having trouble seeing. And then Page ended up bleeding after being rammed headfirst into the cage. Page slipped out of Joe's attempt at a coquina clutch, only to put Joe in the hold instead. Joe escaped. He hit a Uranagi. Joe had Page on the top turnbuckle and went for the muscle buster. Page, though, fought him off. And Hangman slammed Joe's head into the cage. He landed a sunset bomb, after which Katsuyori Shibata comes out. And he distracts Hangman. Shibata grabs the AEW World title, and he begins climbing the cage. So Eddie Kingston comes out, and he pulls Shibata down. Shibata and Kingston, they fight off to the back. In the ring, Joe collides with referee Paul Turner as Hangman hits a dead eye for the visual pin, but there's no referee. So Powerhouse Hobbs comes down to the ring, supposedly in the hospital, if you remember, after that Falls Count Anywhere match with Hangman. He comes to the ring, he rips the lock off the cage door with his bare hands, and he enters with the World Championship, but he misses a belt shot on Page, who sends Hobbs face first into the cage. Joe uses the distraction to apply the coquina clutch, but Page sends Joe crashing into the turnbuckle that had been exposed earlier in the match. Page uses the fact that the door was open to hit a buckshot lariat, which I actually thought was very clever because I think it was, of all people, I think it was on the pre-show, it was the DraftKings guy who mentioned that Page would not be able to hit a buckshot in the main event tonight because you can't go out to the apron in a cage match. But since the door was open, he had that little bit of space there where he was able to hit the buckshot. But there's still no referee. So that's when Hook rushed to the ring and he pleads with Paul Turner to wake up. Only to grab the world title, he smiles and he turns around and he cracks Hangman in the head with the championship. And he reveals an Ops t-shirt that he was wearing. So Joe quickly hits a muscle buster onto the belt as the referee finally wakes up and he counts the pin to give Samoa Joe the title for the second time. Now, after the match, the cage is raised and Hook hugs Joe, and the announcers question if Hook has been part of the Ops all along. It was all just a ruse. As Shibata and all the other members, actually, all the other members, there aren't any other members. It was Shibata and all the members of the Ops dojo. That's what it was. They join Joe in the ring for this celebration, and the lights go out. See, you knew those guys, like, who are these guys, right? You knew why they were out there at this point. They were out there to get their asses kicked. The only question was by who? When the lights come back on, who's going to be out there? I was expecting an MJF return after the match, but that was assuming Hangman won. We didn't get MJF. We got Prince Nana on stage saying, "We're in the money, my friend," before Whose House hits, and Swerve Strickland walks out to a brand new entrance theme. Not that there was anything wrong with his old entrance theme. I'm going to miss it if he's not using it anymore. But this new one is sung by Raekwon the Chef, one of the founding members of Wu-Tang Clan. You can get somebody like that on your track, then yeah, that's the one you're going to use when you come out to the ring. And Nana doing the swerve dance mixed in with the visual of Joe standing in the ring with a spotlight on him, pouring blood, was quite a sight to see. So Joe tells everybody in the ring, all the dojo guys, to step aside. He welcomes Swerve into the ring because he did a slow walk down to the ring. He welcomes him into the ring. He's pointing at Hangman Page, who is still lying motionless on the mat. Yes, Hangman had to lay there the entire time throughout all of this. Probably a good 5 or 6 minutes had gone by. And Strickland slowly takes off his jacket, and instead he ends up taking out the entire Ops dojo, while Joe, Hobbs, Shibata, and Hook all bailed. Hangman finally got back up to his feet. He took care of the last dojo geek before standing beside Swerve to stare down the new champion in the aisleway. Hangman never even turned to look at Swerve, so who knows if he even knew who was standing next to him. But that image of the two of them standing side by side, that hit pretty hard. Swerve, by the way, was looking jacked. Like, go take a look at that parting shot on the pay-per-view and tell me that he didn't look at least a little bit like, just in terms of his build, like Triple H when he came back in Madison Square Garden in 2002. So after 2 blood and guts matches where people were freely going in and out of the cage, we got a steel cage match with interference galore. It's just a running joke at this point. We had violence and gore up and down this card, and the only reason it stood out here was just the sheer amount of blood that Samoa Joe was losing. Otherwise, I would have just shrugged my shoulders at it, which is why I would have saved it for the main event. That's the thing. Like, you have a main event cage match for the championship on this show. I would save it for that. And you could have done that. Like, you just had a blood and guts show 10 days ago. You didn't need it up and down the card here. It would have had that much more of an impact if you would have just saved it for your big championship match. But when you have a no disqualification match and you have a no holds barred match and some of the people they had on the show, like when they go out there, you're going to get all the plunder and the blood and the tacks and the barbed wire. It's just part of the package. The match itself was okay. It was late. I just wanted it to be over, honestly. Like, I was done. Like, I was done. And these two guys deserve better than that. I think it's a real slap in their face when they're put in a position like that. Match didn't start until after midnight. The finish was a bit of a shock. I mean, someone floated the possibility of Joe winning the belt on my Dynamite stream the other night, and I thought it was at least plausible. But I figured MJF would have something to do with it if he did. I wasn't expecting Hook to play a role in the finish of this main event. But between the title change and the Swerve return, which is a big name for Tony Khan to get back, it presents a more intriguing picture now in the world title scene now than if they would have just had Hangman go in there and retain the title again. The Ops has now effectively replaced the Death Riders as the top heel faction in this company. Right? Though the fact that they have so many men concentrated in factions right now is part of the reason why Hangman was left with no credible challengers. The decision to take the title off of him is probably going to be questioned by some people. I like Hangman. I enjoy his work. I had no issue with him being the champion. They gave him a few months. I mean, he won, had that big moment in Texas at All In. And so we went through August and September and October. It's not like they took it off. It's not like fucking TNA where Mike Santana wins the championship at Bound for Glory and they take a month off. And his first fucking defense, that night he drops the belt to Frankie Kazarian. Not quite the same thing, but he fell victim to there really just not being a whole lot of credible challengers for him. I mean, it's a problem the WWE has right now too, especially with their women's title on SmackDown. Not enough credible challengers that have been built up for that spot. That's why I said if they want to get a rematch out of Joe on this show, fine. Because they're probably just going to go into Hangman and MJF going into World's End. That was where my head was at. So doing one more match with Samoa Joe made more sense than starting a whole new program with somebody else, and then you're just going to blow it off in one match anyway. They went a different way with it. And now, are we going to get a possible alliance between Hangman and Swerve? I don't know. We'll see. Or they may be at each other's throats again. Joe gets another run with the belt, which is never a bad thing. Hook is back where he needs to be. because the stuff with Eddie Kingston was just not, it just wasn't working. And maybe it was done that way on purpose because they always knew this was going to be the direction and that would be their way to loop Eddie into the kind of the main event scene. That's also a possibility. We still have no idea when MJF is coming back and he's got that contract to cash in. Does Swerve get the belt back before MJF returns so that we get Swerve and MJF? That's a match we have not seen before. They've teased it multiple times over the last few years on AEW television, but we have not gotten a proper, I don't know if you've gotten a match, let alone a proper program between Swerve and MJF. That would be fresher than just doing MJF and Hangman again. You know, it also avoids going right back to Swerve against Hangman, which is something they could save for later on. So this really just boils down to, like, when is MJF ready to come back? When are they ready to reintroduce him into the mix? And then how long does he hold on to that contract for? Is that something they want to go into as soon as he comes back? Or does he come back with the idea like, oh, I've got this in my back pocket and I have 6 months left to cash this thing in. I'm going to hold on to this for a while, right? And he holds on to it through the winter and the spring, right? I don't know. But Swerve and MJF, that's a fresh match that we haven't gotten before. And that could be your next big world championship feud after Joe drops the belt to presumably Swerve, which is something we've already seen before, by the way. When Swerve won the belt the first time, who did he beat for it at Dynasty? Samoa Joe. Joe had that belt last time from the end of December, basically the beginning of the year, until April. I don't think he's going to have it for even that long this time. You know, I'm not, when I call him a transitional champion, I'm not saying he's going to transition it to somebody else this week, but I don't see him having that belt for very long. So that was your Full Gear pay-per-view, a very eventful show, a very long show, a very bloody show. It had its ups and downs. It was far from perfect. I did think overall, though, it was a strong effort. And now we head into the Continental Classic, which should, if nothing else, give us some really good wrestling matches, but hopefully with some of that Okada Takeshita story really dominating and being the primary story, you know, coming, not just going into, but coming out of that tournament as well, because that's, to me personally, that's been my favorite thing, honestly, on AEW television is the interplay between Okada and Takeshita and all of that sort of bad blood that's been building up now within the Callis family between them for a few months now. And it feels like it's ready to explode at any moment. To me, that's the best thing they've got going. So I'm looking forward to that.